just wanted you guys to know that one of the things coming off of the Casey history session was, will we have a panel tomorrow for Casey Today? And will they be as good, as honest, as forthright as this panel was that we just experienced? And I said, you haven't seen anything yet.
No pressure.
So no pressure. But I say that to say, feel free to share your perspective and your experiences of Casey. We've talked a lot about Casey's history. We've had Doug come and talk and share his perspective of history. We've had a second half day really exploring how Casey's history values led to who we are today. We've now had Patrick share his perspective on what it is to be at Casey today. And now this is an opportunity to add richness and vibrancy to that. What I'll do is I'll ask a series of questions, allow you guys to respond. You guys can respond to one another. Just no fighting, please. I will, at some point, probably about 20 minutes in, call our conversation to a pause to really open it up to our new staff, because this is really their time. Even though we're enjoying this, this is really about them and getting them fully integrated into the foundation, and most importantly, from our perspective, setting them up to be as successful as possible here at Casey for the kids and families we serve. So what I'll ask you each to do quickly and individually is to sort of introduce who you are, share one thing you want them to know about either you or your work, and what area within the foundation you work. And I'll start with Raphael and come this way.
So you give me the least time to think about it, right? Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Rafael Lopez, and I'm the Associate Director of Talent and Leadership Development. And I'm thrilled to be here with you. I've met almost all of you, I think, in person, if not last night, over the last couple of weeks. So one thing I would want you to know about me. So I guess let's start with the sort of the work piece of it, which is I lead two portfolios for the foundation. One is called Mission Critical Networks, and those are fancy words for making sure that the nonprofit grantees and our partners that we invest in are successful, ranging from their financial sustainability to their management structures to their leadership. It's building the capacity of nonprofit organizations to thrive. The other part of the portfolio that I'm responsible for is called Talent Pipelines, and really thinking about how we're investing nationally to create the next generation of folks who will be leading organizations, either in state systems or nonprofit organizations or even the Casey Foundation. And I'm happy to sit down with any of you and walk you through in more detail how we actually do that. So that's a little bit about sort of me on the work end. On the personal end, I think the one thing you should know is sort of how I came into Casey, which I think is an important story to know for all of you in terms of your pathway into this organization, is I first came into Casey as a Casey Fellow. So I was selected in class 7. I was working for Mayor Villaraigosa in Los Angeles as a member of his cabinet, and had a tremendous experience. And so 7 years ago, I was introduced to this Casey family. And that has a particular way in which I see the organization, particularly once you come in, and then I'm a staff member now. So I would want you to know that about me. And when you sit down with me and talk to me in person, it has absolutely influenced how I see our work and my role in this organization.
Thank you. My name is Jan Jackson. I'm a senior associate in the Policy Reform and Advocacy Unit. I'm thrilled to be here as each of you has been introduced at staff meeting. I, along with my colleagues, have been whispering, what the heck are we doing here? Your qualifications are truly stunning. And I look forward to Casey in 10 and 20 years when you're in the driver's seat, because I think you're going to approach the work in new and exciting ways. So it's really an honor to be here, and I look forward to deepening my relationship with all of you. What I want you to know about me personally, the quirky thing is I was born at Mercy Hospital, so I'm 62 and I've made it like one block. When we talk about place, I understand about place.
Was there running water back then?
There was running water, but it was filled with lead, you know?
Which would have been a
The
bad
second thing I want you to know about me is, as Dennis, my partner in crime, says, Jan, I think you have advocacy in your DNA. I spent 14 years helping to build a very large domestic violence intervention center, so I have a passion about children and trauma. The House of Ruth was where I really learned profound lessons about poverty, about race, about injustice, about power and abuse. Then I went on and was executive director of Maryland's state-based child advocacy organization. So I remember this building when it was the city housing building. I remember the day I learned Casey was coming, and we were very hopeful that suddenly all our funding problems would be solved. So I've been part of, first on the outside of Casey, desperately seeking funding and also wondering why they didn't write blank checks for all of us advocates. And then with the privilege of being inside for the last 5 years. But I still carry that advocacy spirit with me and wake up every morning trying to find ways to support state-based advocacy around the country. They're my colleagues. I'm their biggest champion, and it's a real honor to work here. And later, I will get into, you know, what I see as the extraordinary opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Gassert. I'm a program associate with the Juvenile Justice Strategy Group. And I'm incredibly passionate about the work that we do reforming juvenile justice systems, but at the same time, I'm also very skeptical about the ability of the systems to actually do good. And I think that's why I work so well with Bart. One thing I think to know about me is I can be a little bit shy around people I don't know very well, and I have not met hardly any of you, so you know, it's a little bit difficult for me to mingle and such. So if you see me and I don't necessarily wave and run over to hug you, you know, just know that I am a nice person.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Satanya Fair, and I am the Director for Grants Management. Fortunate, like Raphael, I think I've met almost all of you. I see 2 faces I have not met yet, so we'll fix that before this session is over. Grants Management is involved with all of both the programmatic work as well as the administrative and operations side of the house, and we'll talk about that as we go through. I would share that I started this work or came into the nonprofit space working for one of the initial attendance programs in Cincinnati. And in the cobbled web of how we funded programs, part of my salary was paid for by a bank, and the other part by the Cincinnati Bengals as they instituted the attendance program, and they were the main sponsors for really wanting to work in that neighborhood. So I came to this work really knowing about Kids Count, because the data information, which was it called Kids Count from the very beginning?
Yep.
So it's like so familiar. So I'm like, we used to like literally walk around with that information, and it was back when it was a lot of information to walk around with. Now it's on your smartphone, which is great. But I knew about Casey long ago when I came out of law school and went into the work with the attendance program, and that work eventually morphed into liaison work and more community advocacy work. But my heart is with children and families and neighborhoods. That is what I stick to as my core. That's what I do when I volunteer. And so, so most of my professional life has really been on the kind of programmatic nonprofit side. And in the last 7-8 years has switched over to the administrative. So I would just share that just as context for how I approach the work.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gretchen Tess, and I am looking forward to meeting those of you that I haven't yet so far. First, I need to apologize in advance. I'm hosting a webinar later today, and so I'm going to need to duck out a little early. And if I didn't, I think our VP, Teresa, would be a little upset with me, so I hope you'll understand. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. I work in the Child Welfare Strategy Group over at 503 North Charles Street, and I've been at the foundation 10 years, but I was a grantee for 4 before that. And I guess the 2 things to know about me are, one, I believe I'm here because of all of the work that's come before me, both, you know, family and friends and mentors, as well as all of the great advocates and grantees and staff that have been a part of the Casey Foundation from its inception. And I really think this infusion of new people and new ideas is just really going to help us get better. So I'm really excited about this time in Casey. And the second thing is that I am known as sort of a librarian, so I don't profess to know things, but I know where they are, or I know who, or I know who knows it. So if you're looking for something historical, where's that document, or who might be able to answer a question on a specific issue, I'm kind of one of those old timers who might know, or at least I can know who to ask who might know. So feel free to just pick up the phone or stop by, and I like doing that kind of stuff.
So I want to thank you guys in advance. I'm going to start this conversation this way. As you think about what's special and what's challenging about Casey, what would you say those things are, and how do you balance them in your professional life here in the foundation?
I'll jump in. I think what's special is that there is a unique space that philanthropies occupy within civil society. And we need to appreciate what an extraordinary luxury it is to work in a space with enormously talented people that aren't bound by politics, that aren't bound by a corporate hierarchy, that aren't bound by a political or religious or some kind of rigid ideology. The flexible money that we have to spend to focus in areas where everyone knows there's a problem, but nobody quite has permission to solve that problem, is an extraordinary power in civil society. The fact that we're dedicated for children, primarily low-income children, gives us an enormous responsibility and enormous latitude to be able to bring people together to cut through all the denial, all of the ideology, to say what is really going on here, what has been shown to really improve conditions, and to fund those people that have a shot at righting the structural barriers that keep so many people in unnecessary suffering. So there is, so what's a blessing is that money, the fact that we have nothing on the line, right? We can do a lot of things that other people want to do and know that need to be done, and we have the power and ability to do that. I think what's a challenge is that we look out and there are so many barriers facing low-income children that sometimes it's very hard to stay focused on how all of our work lines up for the biggest bang for our investment and our biggest bang for our sort of our knowledge. So sometimes we do a little bit over here and a little bit over there, and one person's deep in the neighborhood trying to figure out the asbestos dust on the sidewalk, and the person in the next office is trying to make sure President Obama's early care and education thing gets passed with that horrible Republican in Oklahoma. And everyone's got a piece of the puzzle or a piece of the elephant, as Patrick said, but how do you make sure at the end of the day that all of this work, which is important, really is the best alignment of resources to tackle those structural issues that cause such inequality, such systematic injustice in our society. And I think that's just the tension that we live with all the time.
For me, the thing that makes Casey really special is that in our work we lead with our values, and especially in juvenile justice. And I'll just share an example. Recently, we were asked to assist in New York City with the commissioner of the probation department there, and John Mattingly, when he was a commissioner, Administration for Children's Services, wanted to work to bring responsibility for taking care of all juvenile justice involved youth to the city, and have a realignment legislative package that would bring funds that were currently going to the state to the city to be able to do that. And so we were brought in to help with that. But we immediately came in and saw this is something, while we totally value the effort in trying to bring kids closer to their families, and also because the state facilities have recently been reported on by the Department of Justice as being horrible. So it was something we deeply cared about, but at the same time we saw that it would pose a potential risk of increasing the use of out-of-home placement if there were new local facilities that were perceived as better than the state facilities. And so and in fact, there had been probably a 60% reduction in commitment to the state facilities over the past several years, and part of that, anecdotally, was due to the fact that the facilities were so horrible. So we had to push pretty hard, in fact, to make the effort of the city work group to focus on not just changing where the kids were incarcerated, but still being committed to reducing the number of kids that were incarcerated. And being from the foundation, we never had to tiptoe around that. We could be pretty upfront about it and forceful that that's what we were there to help with. So that is hugely important to me. I think one of the challenges, at least in my unit, is staffing. We right now are, JDAI is in over 200 local jurisdictions, and we're just now starting to expand the focus of JDAI to the deep end of the system, meaning detention is usually used for kids pending trial, and we want to look at how to reduce incarceration nationwide for kids who have already been convicted. And so what we have, we're growing, but we have like 10 people who are full-time in JJSG, and there are a lot of things that we're working on, and it's just we're all completely maxed out. It's very difficult to achieve our ambitions, but I think we do a pretty good job.
I wanted to follow up, if I could, just based on what Rachel and Jan were saying, and I wanted to sort of give some context to my thoughts, and I was reminded of an author that I've always admired, James Baldwin, and he once said, "I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." And I would say sort of simply, I love Casey. Casey's played an enormous role in my life, personally and professionally, and for that reason, we can make it better. It can be better. And I think Patrick alluded to this, but I wanted to sort of frame my thoughts about what makes it special in the context of a principle that I think that we get in writing when we start here, but to make it real is our biggest challenge. And so it is a special place because we have principles that read like, we are committed to a climate of respect and we encourage open communication up and down, as well as across the organization. The challenge is actually making that real, because we don't do that well and easily every day. If I were to sit here and tell you that we are a completely flat organization, that would be a lie, because we're not. There is a power structure in place, both formally and informally. How you navigate this institution, both in terms of people and in terms of that power structure, is important for you to realize, to learn, and to navigate for you to be successful here. And when I think about the work, the greatest work that makes this special and having these principles in writing and living them are the work that I do across the foundation with partners. So for example, I'm sitting by Jan. I spend a lot of my time with Jan and Dennis on the Kids Count national network. Just in the last 2 days, Jan and I have in partnership with one of our vice presidents, Lisa, and Dennis, are trying to problem solve two really major breakdowns in a state-based organization and a national organization. But for those partnerships, Kids Count wouldn't live. It wouldn't work. And in order to figure that out, we have to have authentic conversations with each other, with the grantees, about what is happening. And respect is about being honest. Respect is not about gentility and always saying yes because it's a foundation we can and do with our money. Respect, from my perspective, in making those principles live today at Casey, is about having difficult conversations that are about the next generation of what they can do. And if we can't figure that out, then maybe they're not the right partner for us. And actually having that conversation and saying that to ourselves internally, and then also with our grantee, that's in my perspective, the most respect we can give each other as colleagues across the organization, up to our vice presidents as we report to Lisa, or in my case, Donna, or Patrick ultimately, and ultimately make that principle live. So we are special because we have those principles written. We are special because we can love Casey and criticize her, but we are also challenged by the fact that making those principles come to life are one of our greatest challenges, because ultimately it's about having an authentic conversation with civility and with a level of diplomacy, and having the ability to actually have an authentic conversation. And that's not always had here. And I want to say that. I think that it's much easier to read on paper than it is to see it every single day. So the biggest piece of advice I can say to you is, when you feel that in your gut and you see it live, don't shy away from it. It's your opportunity to make those principles that you've been given come to life, either within your role, across the foundation, or with the people with whom you're working externally. And that's what makes this place both special and challenging at the same time.
I would add something that's a little bit more just kind of close to home in that I think the most incredible blessing of being at Casey is the people. I think you all represent something that I every day find so amazing, and that is that of 190 staff we'll be at, we'll have how many new people? We're bringing in, there's 30 right now, 40, 45. It's a huge chunk of staff that are absolutely brand new to this institution. And if you look around and you get to know people, the most intelligent, smart, charismatic, authentic people are around you. And I find so much energy from just the interactions. I haven't met one person who wasn't able to connect me with something that I wanted or needed, or maybe didn't even know I needed, but should connect to. So I have found the people here to be so incredibly they push me and they challenge me to do my best, because I believe that we just have such a talented group of people, and we brought in and are bringing in folks like each of you, which are just bringing, as Jan said, a whole new layer of intrigue to Casey. And also, Patrick, in his 3 years plus here as president, has probably overseen more change in this place than it saw the whole time before that. And so the very thing that is the blessing, which is the people, can also be the challenge. And I think particularly in any situation where there is flux and change, I think that you are going to have people who pull in because it has not necessarily been required of them to go with the flow. I come from a corporate environment where the flow gets dictated and everybody moves or else you leave, which is a different mindset. It really is. But I also come from a nonprofit perspective where having ultimate flexibility for the benefit of the whole and the individual is required, although it's very hard to balance. And so I would say that the challenge for kind of my experience in the 3 years I've been here, which when I hear your 10 plus 4, it's amazing. And Jan, we talk about your tenure all the time, which is, she's only 21 though. But it's when you're trying to change and push an organization to think differently and be different, that can be a real challenge. And Patrick talked about in the story, do your job. If you're coming to the table to do your job and you think that nothing's going to influence it, just reset yourself. There will be things that influence the way you do what you do, and hopefully make it better. But the people and the challenges of us being such an incredibly talented group of people, but also some kind of very focused in our thing, can make it quite an interesting day on any given day. So just want to just bring that to the table.
I think for me, it is getting back to Jan's comments about responsibility. I was thinking about when I first got this job, and I was actually in New Orleans at a conference just before I started, and I was walking down the street somewhere in the French Quarter, and no, I was not out partying. I was literally just taking a walk.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right, Gretchen.
No judgment.
But what I remember from the moment is I was walking down the street with a really good friend who was a mentor. I got my start in domestic violence world and working with immigrants and refugees and doing racial justice work. And she was somebody who just kind of incorporated all of those things in one person. And I said, so, I'm starting this job soon. What's your advice? And she said, and she stopped me in the middle of the street and she said, Gretchen, you're a gatekeeper now. She said, you need to remember that this is both a challenge and an opportunity for you. Just by sitting in that building, you're going to have access to people and resources and decisions that none of us do. And you need to remember that every day. And I was like, wow, man, I just thought we were going for a walk. But it was really good advice for me. I'm still trying to do that every day. Some days I forget. But the other thing that's helped me a lot is the people here. And, I really turn a lot to folks like Bart Lubau and John Mattingly, who, their guidance has always been, around that responsibility piece, what's right for kids and families, what's right for for your coworkers, what's right for you, and let that be your guide, and don't let, the bureaucracy get you down, don't let rules and regulations get you down. Find a way to make it happen, because that's why, we're all here, whether it's find a way to make it happen in terms of getting that grant out the door, or responding to a grantee, or, doing the work in a site, or just even solving a problem with a coworker, try to do what's right, so.
So I want to pivot this just slightly. As you think about the work that you do here at the foundation, we've talked a lot about history. How has it built upon the past? But more importantly, how have you made it your own, such that what's moving forward isn't hindered too much by the past? So there's benefits from the past, and then there's legacy associated with past. So how have you taken the history and pivoted and made the work your own work?
So I'll go. I've actually brought something that hangs in my office, and it's actually a picture from, actually, it's really interesting. You may not know this, Library of Congress, you can go get original copies of photographs and the original negatives of historical papers in the country. I forget what it is, for like $5, $6, $7. So this is actually a reproduction from the original negative of a picture taken on February 2nd, 1960, Greensboro, North Carolina. And it's 3 young men who are sitting at a Woolworth lunch counter, fighting to be able to get served at the counter. And I have this in a very particular place in my office, because tied to exactly what Gretchen said, it is my visual reminder about the history and legacy of this country, not just on racism or power, structure, et cetera, but about the role I occupy at this place, and I am a gatekeeper. And I spent my entire career writing grants and hustling for money from foundations just like Casey. And know how to write a damn good proposal, know how to work that budget for people like Satanya's eyes. I'm telling you, you know that saying, you can't, anyway, this is being filmed, I should be tame. But why I use this visual image is because I feel like we have to constantly remind ourselves at a place like Casey, no matter who you are or what your role here, whether you give money directly like I do, I'm a grant maker as well as a consultant, if you will, is that we have the keys to a door that's about access to capital and power. And really understanding that legacy here, what philanthropy is in this country, and both the amazing legacy of American philanthropy of solving problems like polio eradication, for example, or malaria, or other kinds of big world issues. It's also a legacy that's very troubled in America around how we shelter our money. Who gets to keep it, how it's made, and who are the gatekeepers of that money. So I take my role very, very seriously. And so how I translate that history of philanthropy and sort of the legacy of challenges, I translate it very directly into my work. So I mentioned that I'm working on talent pipelines. So we have a focus on early to mid-career people of color for the social sector. So you might ask, well, why? Well, it's driven by data. 75 to 84% of all nonprofit organizations in this country do not reflect the diversity of the people they serve in their own organizations. 91% of philanthropic institutions do not represent the diversity of the grantees or the people they serve, and most of the senior leadership teams of foundations do not represent that. That's not being harsh, that's keeping it real. Now, there are subtleties, the differences of demographics in my portfolio, that you might have more diversity in one foundation or one grantee or another, but writ large, as we see the massive demographic shifts happening in our country, we know, similar to the principle about valuing diversity as core to who we are as a foundation, that we need all voices at the table. All voices represented in terms of our thought processes, in terms of our decision making, in terms of shaping our agenda. It's not a black-white thing, it's an American thing. And when we look at the shifts both in the foundation staffing as well as in the nation in terms of our grantees and overall, we have to do better. Not because it's the right thing to do or it's because it's the new era of affirmative action, it's because it's the future of our country. So for the first time in American history, many states in this country are seeing the scales tip to who the children are being born in that state. So I hail from California, born and raised there. We were the first state in the country to have a majority majority, quote unquote, minority population shift. So the number of kids being born to multiracial families completely outweighed any other state in the country. More people in this country are identifying as multiracial, not one particular background, than ever in our American history. Nearly 35% of Americans identify themselves as some sort of quote-unquote minority status. That word itself is no longer relevant in this day and age. So how I take the legacy of philanthropy, of American history, of the Casey Foundation, and translate that into my portfolio is that I have to make what I consider to be important decisions here and fight the good fight. Courage is sitting at this counter. Courage is not making a good grant or doing your job every day.
Right.
And I keep that in mind, which is that if you did your job well, that meant pushing on the boundaries of what we find acceptable or status quo here at Casey, back to because we deserve better. We all want to be better, and the people with whom we work expect that of us. Whether it's in Rachel's JJSG work, when she's actually working with a very conservative Republican administration, she knows that if she doesn't figure out how to get a relationship going, she's not going to move the needle in that area. Same way that I work with other people across the country, when I have to work with them to figure out how best to tap into their networks nationally and actually have a conversation about the lack of diversity, not only in their organization, but if they want to actually see those folks who are tremendously smart and tremendously powerful in their own right lead those organizations before that have never once before seen diversity in their leadership ranks. So ultimately, I think it's a balance. It's bridging the past and calling into question that this past is not a fixed moment in time, and neither is our present. And you as new staff get to help mold that. You get to figure out, both either with me or this panel in partnership and with others in the foundation, how to make that live. And I think that's sort of the beauty of it all.
Let me pick right up on that, because just everything Raphael said has translated into what we've done in the last 5 years that I've been here to make what Raphael just said a living, breathing, and actually happening in every state. So for the last 20 years, Casey has been investing in the Kids Count project, which was based on the hypothesis that good decisions need good data. And the hypothesis was the reason why everybody says that kids are important and why kids are doing so poorly is because there isn't a valid independent measure of child well-being in major areas of health, education, economic security, and health that's put out there by an institution that has credibility. So for the last 20 years, we've been, putting out the book, and here's last year's book. A new book is going to come out on June 24th. We have a national data center, and your homework for today is to personally go on that data center and pull up the data for your county and just, ponder, the difference between how you think kids in your county are doing, how they're really doing, and just sort of stop and smell the coffee, that it's really horrifying. The hypothesis was if we could shock people with the data, that would automatically lead to political action. The country would have a wake-up moment and go, oh my God, poverty is at 25%, let's do something about it. Well, guess what? 20 years went by, and everybody was like, yeah, it sure is. It's 20%, it's 22%, it's 21%. Yeah, it sure is. That data alone was not doing it. And so in the last couple years, what we've said is it is time to go Kids Count 2.0. So we have a national data book. We now have a data center with 3 million data points. We can tell the scores of testing at the smallest jurisdictional level in the middle of the Nevada desert. I mean, we can count things. But the point was that if you don't have people on the ground that can take that data, figure out how to turn it into persuasive stories, that can take that complexity and make it simple and actionable, if you don't have people on the ground that have relationships with people at the State House that can then say, okay, is this acceptable? Is this level of poverty, this level of racial injustice, this level of really horrible health outcomes acceptable? If not, guess what? Casey funds a whole army of people that says here are the evidence-based policies that if you enact them, guess what? They really narrow the gaps. They really lift all the boats. Let's create the kinds of powerful state coalitions that put pressure on elected officials to enact the stuff that makes children's lives better. All the horrible outcomes that we experience in America are not acts of nature. right? They are acts of omission and commission by our elected officials. Things are the way they are because of policy, not because of the weather.
Right.
All right? We know how to eradicate poverty. We know how to educate kids. We know how to make people healthy. It's much easier than going to the moon. You know, if you ask me what 10 policies, if they were put in place, would improve the lives, we know what they are. And there's examples in every state where somebody has moved some part of that ball down the court. The problem is not we lack data, we lack knowledge. We lack political will. And right now in America, in the last couple years, and why we're ramping up capacity building for our state networks, there are enormous forces in this country with a competing agenda. They don't wake up every morning saying, I want to make life, for kids better. They wake up every morning with an ideological agenda that says, the problem in America is government's too big. My job is to shrink government. My job is to completely, undermine any kind of fair taxation, give money to the wealthy, to shelter money, and to completely undermine the civil society. It's called ALEC. There's a whole cluster, a secret society of corporations that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars influencing state legislators in ways that, I certainly think violate every state ethics law with impunity. They're going in, not saying we hate poor kids and we want to take away opportunity from poor kids. No, what they're saying is, let me help you write that piece of legislation about building new prisons in Nevada. Why? Because the correctional industry is an industry. They make money when you build more people. How do you get more, prisons built? By writing laws that make immigrants, vilifying immigrants and wanting to deport or wanting to arrest more immigrants. What happens when you arrest more immigrants? Guess what? You need more places to put them. Where are you going to put them? You're going to put them in a jail, therefore you build more jails. So if this isn't Jan's conspiracy theory, I'm happy to send you.
You got data to back it up.
I have data, I have reports, I have evidence. So right now, there's a lot of forces in this country that are trying to work out social problems through fiscal policy, and our guys are sort of the last, barricade at the state level, fighting for things like children's health insurance, fighting for earned income tax credits, fighting for quality pre-K. And they're having a tough fight out there, and they need resources. So Raphael and I and others in this foundation are doing everything we can to cooperate, collaborate, to build the muscle that's needed at the state to push back some of these forces that guarantee that children's lives will do worse. And why is it so important? Exactly for what Raphael said. We are seeing a surge of children of color being born in this country, particularly the Hispanic population rate is through the roof. Those kids' brains are developing today. Those kids need the best that America has to offer. We're seeing astronomical rates of poverty. 39% of all African American children in America live in a family of 4 making less than $22,000 a year. Let me say that again. 39% of every African American children in America is living in a family of 4 making less than $22,000 a year. Now think for a moment, you and your partner and your 2 kids, where would you live for $22,000 a year? How would you put that kid through college? How would you be able to afford a single illness, a single car breaking down? Right? Those kids' brains are developing now. They need the best. In order to get the best, we have to neutralize those forces that are working against us and be the smartest, most persuasive advocates that we can. So we are dramatically ramping up state-based advocacy to meet the adaptive challenge that we find ourselves in. We don't have any feeling about this. Okay?
You guys want to respond?
I would just say, drawing on the recent past, right? My past here is relatively recent, but just in general, it's interesting how there's been a lot of amazing good ideas at Casey. And so you talk to people and you go, oh yeah, I remember when we talked about that, or I remember people were suggesting that we do this. And even what Jan and Raphael are talking about came out of these conversations that we have in small groups. And I would say that there's some recent past at Casey where a group of people kind of got together and went on a fantasy walk of what they would love to see for the foundation as far as our grant making. And it was really kind of funny because there was a person, was she employed here, Kim Love? Did she work here at some point? Does anyone know if Kim Love actually worked here? She was a consultant. She draws. She does artwork. She basically takes your concepts and turns them into a drawing, a thing that you can kind of see and imagine, which can actually be quite amazing for the work. We were just in the room, I was surprised, we were over in 503 a couple days ago, and all the stuff that was on the wall, someone was doing a lot of charting of everything that they were thinking in their brains. But, so there was a group of like maybe 20 people here at the foundation, which was back when there were like 50 people at the foundation, who were kind of thinking, oh, this would be a great idea. And then they left it, and someone did the drawing, and they paid Kim, and they left it somewhere in my office. And it's like really interesting that everything that I've been working on since I got here, and then prior to me being the director, John Kim, who most of you all have met, was the manager and then director of grants management. And we've been able to kind of draw on this kind of fantasy version of what we could do as a grant-making organization and make it the reality. And so it's recent past, but I have the good fortune of being one of those people here who, you know, is able to spend a chunk of time working on somebody's big idea from 6 years ago that got charted on one piece of paper and left in my office. And so in 2014, to be able to see everything that we've built in our grants management system and the way that we're working actually reflects, and it was like a Wordle. Back before Wordles, I swear she drew a Wordle. It was pretty cool. But it's like, it reflects all the key big components that they wanted to be able to see our grant making do. And so it's been a very refreshing experience to now have a new group of staff who are starting to consult on this very project that started out of really kind of the need for the organization to be able to get money more efficiently and more practically out to our partners and our consultants. And we were having real struggles with that leading up to the last like few years. And so I just think that that's, even though it's a slightly different take, it's like the recent past. I love how you can just have a good idea. So many of us have had a good idea and never went back to it. Casey had a good idea and actually hired me to kind of go back to it. And I think that that really says a lot about where the leadership is as well today and where the staff is, and just being able to support kind of like this vision, which is very much not programmatic. It's very much on the administrative side, but it's going to allow everybody to be able to do what you all are so passionate about so much better and easier. And so that's a past to present kind of experience I've had.
So I want to give Rachel or Gretchen an opportunity if you want to weigh in on this one.
So I guess maybe a little more small scale answer, sort of. So as we have over the past few years in JJSG set out to design this expansion of JDAI to the deep end of the system, it's given us opportunity. There was never an assumption that it would just be JDAI 2.0. We came in with the assumption that we would have to learn from the mistakes that were made in JDAI and question the approach to JDAI, and we've done that. And particularly, even as program associate, I've had a pretty involved hand in designing what the one part of our deep end work will look like, and that's the local. We're working about the state level and the local level, and even though JDAI was sort of built around using outside consultants, relatively hands-off approach, we have taken some learnings from the past in terms of before I was in JDAI, before JJSG existed, we had the strategic consulting group, which did consulting engagements with both child welfare and juvenile justice systems. And then there was the realignment. This was even before the 3 Ps. And we separated by subject matter instead. So that's how the child welfare strategy group came about and the juvenile justice strategy group. And so we were then doing JDAI and consulting. And so I had been involved with the consulting work previously. And so we designed the local approach to be a sort of JDAI and consulting hybrid. And we're just starting the work now, so it remains to be seen whether or not that will be successful. But it's sort of just getting the opportunity to question the way things have always been done and the way things can be done moving forward. What's the cost and benefit of using retired judges as your consultants versus, wanting to use young, bright, analytical people who.
Unlike the judges.
I was just going to say that.
No comment on that.
Right, maybe not.
They bring a lot of experience.
Just
Very good.
But these people early in their careers, they can't really work as consultants because they need full-time jobs with benefits. So how do you deal with that challenge? And just being able to be a real part of that problem solving has been a great opportunity.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think thinking back, a lot has changed. I mean, just looking at this room, the diversity of Casey has really grown over the years. And when I came here, this place looked a lot different. And I think that's a credit to the leadership that, really has been continuing to move to diversify the workforce here and bring different perspectives and experience in to be the future of the foundation. And this is really pretty new. I mean, when I got here, there was really no career ladder for people. And just, to give you some perspective, I had the opportunity to move over from one unit to another, and I thank Doug Nelson and Kathleen Feely for giving me the opportunity. I was the first person here to be promoted from program associate to senior associate, and I am forever grateful for that opportunity. That was only 5 years ago. And so I really think there have been some major changes in terms of how the foundation views professional leadership development for people at all levels. And I think also bringing in folks from the communities that we serve to be a part of the foundation has made a huge difference. And that's been a really, sort of looking back, it's been a really positive change. There's been a lot of reorganizations in the middle of that, which has been tough. But you asked about kind of how do we make this our own, I guess. And for me, just taking that opportunity, for me, I really wanted to work on the issue of congregate care, which that means for kids who are removed from their families and put into foster care, they end up living in an institution. And I just think it's wrong. I think we can do better by kids and families. And so I had the opportunity to move into this new role, and I said, I want to work in this issue. And so that's been my focus. That's pretty much all I've done since Bill knows, since I moved over, learned a lot from Bill and many of you in the room about the work. So that's how I've kind of made it my own. And just to kind of give an example from the work, I've been working in Connecticut for the last 3 years with a pretty big team. And had some great leadership in the state of Connecticut. And when I got there, they're under a class action lawsuit. They had, in any given year, about 250 kids aged 6 and under who were living in an institution. So if you think about your 5-year-old, kid or granddaughter or neighbor's kid, if something happened to their parents, where would you want them to go? Where would you want them to live? I don't think you'd choose an institution for them to live in. I think you'd want them to be with another family member, together with their siblings, so they could stay in their own school, et cetera. Well, Connecticut was putting kids routinely, and teens routinely, into group care. And that's really changing. There's still a long way to go, but they've pretty much eliminated the use of institutional care for very little kids through some legislation and policy, and they've cut the number of teens in group care by half. So for me, that's the reward. I had this opportunity that I might not have had in other organizations, and I'm really grateful for it. And so it's nice to see the results of all of that long, history.
Can I just, in the spirit of being open and sharing, respond to Gretchen's comment about professional development? I just think that while I remember when Gretchen was promoted, and there have been several promotions since then, but one thing that has been a problem, I think, here at the foundation is just a lack of transparency about that process. As far, I don't know if there is actually a career ladder or how one would go about following that career ladder. It seems to be done haphazardly and, just by unit. So I just wanted to share that and be honest about that.
So I have one last question for you guys, and what I really want is just two numbers to be said. Two numbers. The question is, how many years have you been here? And how many different groups have you been a part of? Because there's been some illusion, let's just say there's been some referral to, there's been a lot of change. I want to provide some context, and then I'm going to open it up to the group to ask you guys questions. So how many years have you been here? How many groups have you been a part of?
You mean units?
Yeah,
Units, oh.
Not like teams.
units.
Units, okay. I've been here 10 years. I've been with 2 units, but they've all had like 6 or 7 names.
Family,
Oh,
Consulting group.
consulting group, and child welfare strategy.
right, so, right. Because it changed names, right?
3 years almost. I am at 2 years, 10 months, 2 weeks, 3 days.
But who's counting?
Who's counting? And 1 team, Grants Management.
I've been here a little over 7 years, and I've been with 4 groups. But one was a job change, so
5 years, same unit, name change.
So as staff, almost 3 years, 1 group, 3 name changes.
Welcome to Casey. I actually want to give you guys time. I can stand up here and have conversation with these guys all day and enjoy it, but you guys, I'm sure, have questions that you want to know.
Fire. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. No questions. Start with 1.
One.
I have a question. So my takeaway yesterday was, from the panel yesterday, was relationships matter. And I've heard each of you say that today. And then Casey hosted a very nice reception last night for new staff, and it was lovely. But there certainly weren't 190 people in attendance. So I'm just going to challenge this a little bit, that Casey has a perception of what they are, and then what they do maybe is something different. Or just a chance to respond to that.
I would say absolutely. It's interesting, the reputation also that the foundation has outside of here. And it's funny when Gretchen mentioned gatekeeper, you all should know, like, the foundation receives approximately 500 phone calls a year, of which I field, and approximately 500 kind of unsolicited, kind of random requests for all kinds of things, mostly money. But it's interesting that what people perceive us to be and what we do when you go into the philanthropic world and people talk about Casey, it's like really amazing. And then internally, there's some issues. I mean, there's some serious siloing going on. This is only recent that we've even talked about it openly, kind of since I got here. Raphael and I came here at the same time. And we could kind of sense in the beginning, because we came in here like, what's going on, And it was like, okay, we're working on some stuff, like hold tight, don't quit your first day. But yeah, as far as being open and welcoming and kind of like those values that you keep hearing about, actually making sure that they are part of each person day to day. I mean, only the last 2 years have we required mandatory reviews. So look, we're a new foundation. We're not Carnegie. We don't have 100 years in where we've been figuring this out over and over and over again. And I think that in some ways, that kind of spirit of professionalism and courtesy is still in progress. And I'm sorry that all 190 weren't there yesterday, because they hopefully, at least the ones who weren't traveling, because that's 50% of the staff on any given day, right? So maybe we could have gotten up to about 95 plus. But I at least hope that the people who were there took some time to say hello and introduce themselves to you all, because it's going to be one by one. But honestly, we're still struggling there.
I would also add that something that I found has done me in really good stead. This is sort of like, just sharing like a personal adaptation thing, is because I've watched, when I first came to Casey, I just thought I'd died and gone to heaven because, I had this wonderful health insurance, I had a paycheck, I had technology that worked, I had a pretty desk,
Wait, you
somebody
had
was
technology
paying-
that worked? No.
I did. I mean, there was a computer sitting on my desk. Then it worked. I mean, I came from the nonprofit where we had the same old rickety furniture for like 11 years. Could never afford like a new chair. So I was in heaven and walk around. And it's like, and all the old timers were so crabby. Everybody, it was like they're always focusing on what wasn't right, what Casey wasn't doing.
We
And I
didn't
was
like that lunch.
Yeah, and I was like, go have a life. Go outside this building and go try and work in one of these nonprofits. Go work and live in a neighborhood that we're trying to help. It's like, get over yourself, guys. You are in this bubble of privilege. Stop complaining and buck up and do what you can. And then after 4 or 5 years, I was like, I didn't like that lunch. I'm like, oh
Assimilation.
no! What I try and do is focus less on what isn't right about Casey, the sort of internal, crabby politics, and just wake up every morning. I hope every single one of you, no matter what place you're at Casey, you care about, there's one kid in your life that touches you to the core. There's one result area that just moves you to no end, that it's just not right. There's like one thing that touches you all the way down to the core. And you have it to wake up every morning and affirm that and say, today, whatever I do, may I make my actions lead this world towards doing right by that child or doing right by that result area. That's going to be the lens through which I really bring my full self to every interaction. It's going to be the critical question I ask in every meeting. Okay, we got all these great ideas and all this Casey process. I mean, you can drown in process and people. But at the end of the day, is that group of people or that process going to lead this country a step closer to justice for that child that you care about or for that result area? And if you stay focused on that, I swear you will have a happy experience at Casey. You will have an amazing experience at Casey. You will do wonderful, fantastic things. If you focus on what's not right, you will just drown, and it's just will be such a total waste.
I want to echo Satanya's comment that we're terribly siloed, and I would just add the two buildings especially. I told her when we sat down, I don't come over here unless I have to. But I do want to also put a positive spin on it, which I think that we, not on the siloing, but I think that we here, Foundation does support work-life balance very well. And, I didn't feel pressure. I don't live in Baltimore. I live closer to DC. And maybe I should have come to the reception, but at the same time, I felt like, that there's a culture here that says, like, it's you have an hour drive home. You want to be with your family. Like, that's what we support. So, good and bad.
I just want to add to that. So I guess in direct response to your question, Dawn, you are right. But learning when and how the relationships matter is a subtlety to Casey.
Yeah.
So not being at the reception is one indicator, but not all of them.
Right.
So I have found that the way I built relationships in both buildings across units was one-on-ones and where work mattered when people asked me for help. So rather than saying, I'm going to meet 75 people in my first 3 months, I was like, wow, I need to learn about the Kids Count Network. Who knows it best? Well, Jan Jackson's the queen of it all. Okay, and back then it was Don Query. Okay, and then Mike Laracy's involved. Okay, well, I'm going to figure out how to get to know them and then be helpful to each other. That's how we became both great colleagues and also good friends.
Yeah.
So I think that the relationships do matter. They matter immensely, but it's in how you use them. Because when you most need someone's help to move an item in Satanya's office, to go to finance, people remember how you treat them. And I am struck to this day how people forget that here. And Casey's not alone. This happens everywhere I've ever worked, whether it's any political administration I've worked for, or any nonprofit I've worked for. It's the same damn thing. Relationships matter, people matter, but they will remember when you didn't give them the dignity of your time or respect, when you need to get that invoice paid. Trust me. And Casey's not alone there. So I feel like relationships do matter, but it's incumbent on you to decide how, in Dawn's voice, you're going to make those relationships happen, and more than just the one reception. And the last part I want to say, when I first started here, it was midsummer, and I was like, where the hell are the people? Who works here? And I didn't have a big travel schedule yet, so I'll be gone next week.
was
almost
quiet.
3 days of the whole week, I'll be out in DC and New York, for my work. And I'm like, oh, now I get it. But, when you walk around this building, particularly in summer, very few people are
So
here.
did I miss the memo?
I know. What is it? And so I think it's like
snow day?
it's like it throws you. When a lot of our work is out in the field. For those of us who do grant making or the consulting work, it's just a very different animal.
I want to give Gretchen an opportunity to say something before she disappears.
Oh, no, just to respond, I mean, for me, you've hit on one of the key challenges we have. There have been a couple of staff surveys over the years, and communications and relationships is always the number one challenge. I think, there's all, we can all, starting with myself, do more work on it. I think these opportunities like this and like the buddy system and things that are starting up they're really exciting, and you old timers like me are really excited about it. It's a nice a nice way to welcome people and to begin building those relationships with some new folks. So, but I think it really is one of our biggest challenges. So any ideas you guys have, feel free. I hope that I think we're doing better than we were, and it's a growth process, but it is a unique organization. I've never worked in an organization where the relationships and communications piece was this challenging for me. So that's my own reflection. I love working here, though. I will say I do. I love working here.
Hello, stellar, wonderful panel, including members of the panel that I feel like I'm building excellent relationships with through our summer boot camp. Shout out to folks who are in it. Tonight, 5:45. It makes me go over to the other building, right? So, but I'd love for you to respond to a couple phrases, thoughts. Not really a coherent question, but thinking about Jan, you talked about, wanting to push people out of their bubble of privilege. And Patrick talked about just remembering, holding this value around whether or not, advancing solutions that we would want for our own children, and thinking about if it were our family, how hard would we work for it, right? And so thinking about that and balancing that against all this talk about flexible resources, the luxury of being able to innovate and take risks, right? And know that we're taking risks with people's real lives and with children's lives who, and the urgency of the problems that we're facing are great. And so sometimes, right, it can be very disconcerting to sit, and especially for somebody who has come from being a practitioner, right? And so like every day it was firefighting for this family, for this child right now. They just got arrested. They just did this, right? To then come into a space and kind of sit around a table where it really becomes an intellectual exercise. Today I was writing and I thought about this new idea we might try. Let's maybe draw it this way or think about it this way, and then test it in this community that we're working in, right? Whereas I actually don't want people testing on my family, and you don't want people testing on your family. And so, but we do, right, want to be able to build evidence. We do want to be able to try new things and have the best and brightest ideas and honor that privilege that we do have. So how do we work with that?
I think the first step is you need to say that when we sit around all
a staff
politely
meeting.
listening to program reviews with a lot of senior leadership in the room, where it all sounds, where there's pressure because you're new, not to say what's screaming in your guts, like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
We don't know enough that we have to experiment and do some little pilot thing. Like, are you kidding me? That I think that's where the authentic. I love Casey, and because I love Casey, I'm going to call the question. I'm going to have the confidence to call the question because I think you're dead on, and I think for me, you go to the central most painful point for me at Casey, which is, we pride ourselves on kids count. This data is just screaming tragedy. We rank 26th in overall child well-being out of 29 nations in the world. I mean, 26.
Yeah.
We're
And
like.
And that's overall. If you disaggregate it, it'd be even worse.
Yeah, it would
That's
be.
exactly right. So we walk around with this feeling like we're America and kids are doing bad. They are not doing okay. They are doing terrible, and they're getting worse all the time, and there's forces that guarantee they're going to get worse. We are the largest children's foundation in America. What the hell are we doing to accelerate those ideas we already know to stop that hemorrhaging? Where is the urgency, and where is the sense of coming together around a couple really powerful strategies that we do full throttle?
But Jan, you mentioned like the big issue, like speaking partly for myself, but I absolutely say this. People know I work for Casey when I go out in public, and I say exactly this, which is we have become academicians in philanthropy, and it's BS. Because for that very reason, when I'm sitting beside a child who is stuck in the system and not moving anywhere, it's like, what in the heck are we doing? Like, we know what's right, we know what's wrong, we know what we need to do. What are we doing? And I definitely have sat in meetings here at Casey and been like, how long are we going to talk about this before we make a change, whether it be, you know, a policy change or on the way we fund or whatever else. But philanthropy is extremely risk averse. Anybody who was at the Council on Foundations, I know some of you are new to here, but in your prior lives, like their last session was totally about in trying to encourage philanthropy to stop being so absolutely risk averse. I mean, as crazy as it is, you know, even the IRS has released some restrictions on being a private foundation, and some of the things like for Jan and the policy and lobbying and advocacy side, it's not as restrictive as we think. But the problem with us is that we want to freaking fund the sure thing. We want to fund the thing that's going to be successful, and we want to run from the thing that might fail. And that's an issue for us, and it's an issue around how we even talk about or articulate failure. We also, as a large foundation, we set up these requirements for what the hell you have to do to even get a grant and report out on that grant, which really takes away the opportunity for people who are on the ground, who are probably doing amazing things at the local level. They can't even get in the door. We are an RFP only. When they call me, I tell them we don't fund unsolicited. The door is closed for them immediately. So we're also very closed as an organization. So there are a lot of things that we have to get comfortable with. Don't be an academician, be honest. Stop being, you know, risk averse. And the other thing is understand you're going to fund a failure, you know?
In juvenile justice, I don't think that we are becoming academicians, and in fact, everything that we do is focused on whether we would want what's happening in these systems to happen to our children. I don't have kids, but other people's children. I mean, in fact, Danielle is here as new staff, but she's worked with us for a long time, and she was the team leader for, she still is team leader for a number of jurisdictions. I mean, she would literally have conversations with her coordinators about individual kids that were in detention for too long. And so, but at the same time, it is very risky because we are advocating for reduced incarceration, and the kids that we advocate to not be incarcerated could go out and kill someone. So we have two sides of risk. We have the kid that could be incarcerated, and that's his life that he's being incarcerated, and we have public safety to worry about. But that doesn't stop us from being forcefully pushing our values and what we think is right. A few years ago, shortly after Patrick became president, there was a push to make sure that we were focusing more on youth well-being and understanding if our system reform work really had an impact on long-term youth well-being, and that raised some concerns in my group about, does this mean that if research shows that reducing incarceration isn't better for kids, that we're going to stop doing it? And Patrick said, no, absolutely not, that it's the right thing to do and we will keep doing it. It just means that what we put in place instead should have better outcomes for kids in the end.
I hate to pivot back to process from that, but I guess I want to push back a little bit on what you're saying, Raphael, and what I'm hearing from the whole panel. I so appreciate the passion and the encouragement for us to speak up. At the same time, not just in Casey, but in any organization, office politics are real, hierarchy is real, power dynamics are real. And so I'm not sure that it's the right advice to send, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure it's the right advice to send 30 people back to 10, 12, 15 different groups saying, call the question anytime there's hypocrisy, anytime there's, paralysis by overanalysis. And I wonder if you can give some more insight on.
So you probably figured out I'm not shy. So I don't agree with your point, and I'm going to walk you through why I don't agree with your point. So, and I'll sort of frame it first from the personal and go to the career and political. So first of all, there isn't a single bit of Casey's work that I cannot draw a personal connection to my immediate family, either me or my siblings or my extended family. Not one bit of Casey's work. So when I step into any room at Casey, I bring with me
Your family.
every one of my family members. And you cannot talk about poverty and welfare without talking about my lived experience. I was on welfare. My family was on welfare. You cannot talk about third grade reading scores or adoption or prisons or reentry or foster care or community development or anything we write about without me bringing those people into the room. So I have the fierce urgency of now that Dr. King spoke about. Now I have a voice that I've honed over my career that is mine. I am not saying to you all, take up Rafael Lopez's voice. You probably get fired.
Have your own.
And my take is I live my life where I'm willing to get fired.
Right.
I am willing to, and I have a family to care for, and I have a family. Now that's me. You have to find you have to find your voice at Casey, because if you were to go out and simply criticize everything without having some credibility or knowledge or a real idea, you will get fired. So I think I want to correct, I'm not saying go out there to 15 different groups and raise hell. You've got to figure out when and how you raise hell in your own way.
Yeah.
I live by a particular code that is my own. I'm not saying you have to adopt it. But when you look at the data that Jan is lifting up, and we joke amongst each other, wouldn't you think we'd want to do something about it? Well, the fact is we don't as a country. And we have a place of privilege to try to do something about it. So you're in your own way, in your own voice at JJSG, you're going to figure that out for you. I think that you are 100% correct in saying that you have to understand the politics of Casey just the way you did with every one of your former employers. Right? Dawn worked at a law firm. If she got up and said, I hate this invoicing system, they'd be like, see ya, Dawn. I mean, let's be
billable
clear,
rates are
right?
too high.
So what I'm saying is that you can't take everything we say on its face value, but what I think Bill and Steph and Donna and Patrick want is you have all these perspectives of how the way in which we take in Casey, take up our work at Casey, and how we shape it. And at the end of the day, I have learned at Casey, there isn't a thing I will not bring up that I am not willing to work on and or have thought through and or have a solution to try to make it better. And I'm willing to fail 50 times at it to make this place better, not for me, not for the staff, but for the kids in whose names we spend our money. And if we can't make that link clear, we shouldn't be doing the work, and you shouldn't be here. And when and in my opinion, when there's a disconnect between those worlds, then it's time for you to leave from Casey. And I'm okay with saying that, because again, I come from a very particular personal approach to the work, and I know what it was like to be on the other side of the table and have your family disrespected, abused, and taken for stupid because you couldn't speak the language correctly or because you didn't have the right connections. So understanding the nuances in relationships matter, understanding the politics of those relationships and how to leverage them, use them, and or abuse them, because that happens here and every place else. Understanding how to take your role and run with it in a really powerful way, and enjoying the work, enjoying what you do, enjoying that you have the luxury of doing really cool stuff here in a way that you can't every place else. So I guess I would say I would take exception with part of your comment. I think you're right on, and I think I'm glad that you brought it up, because I hope no one takes away from my comments that go over and burn the building down. That's not what I think. And I think you have to be very, very careful, and you are dead right about that, because learning how to navigate these waters is what's going to lead to your great success here.
Yeah, and I would say that your voice can be heard not through you, and that is what I have learned. When I came in here, I was extremely quiet, which no one believes. But I mean, like Raphael, I might call Raphael or after work, because we used to work late, and be like 7 o'clock, and I'd go up to his office, or he'd come down to my office and be like, what the hell? That was our conversation, right? But the second part of that was our strategy, right? And we realized that we could not come into, and I'm going to say the we, I'm not saying just Raphael, there are tons of us who realize you just don't come into the room and say what you have to say. But I have become extremely astute at talking to my fellow staff, especially with the other directors, and particularly SLT, and having those private meetings with them, and being able to say, we had this meeting at XYZ, and I was really thinking about this. Can you help me think through this? I'm sad that Donna's not here, but Donna has served a role for me as, kind of like this moderator. In a sense, she has an ability for me and some of the things that I have had to go to leadership with, and the committee of managers to be able to say, okay, everybody, stay in the middle, like here, listen, and you know what? And I seek her out for things I know they're going to challenge people, or maybe they might not understand my perspective. I have sought out different senior leaders, and I literally will sit with them and sit with them and sit with them. And when I go in the room, before I even speak, they have already seeded the idea, the notion, the concern, the problem. So understanding what can be just your honest voice of reaction and saying, what? And what can be like, you know what? This was a concern, or this is whatever. I might send Bill an email. Like that staff meeting was really intriguing because of XYZ. What about this? I could have sent that to all staff. Like, you have the ability, you can do it. You probably get fired, but you could. But at the end of the day, understanding that your voice can be heard and that there are nuances to how, even if you come to it as a group. Because I think one of the other things that we've been successful at, I think JJ and some others have come forward as a group with a voice, and that also is heard well. So knowing what's your individual voice versus what your team or your unit versus what should just always only come out of your SLT members' mouth. Those things you will have to learn, and that is the reality.
I just want to add, I do think that there are sacred cows, as any organization has them. I think the career ladder is a sacred cow. I think that in the past, CFS was a sacred cow. There's certain, and part of it is because of our values. It's like everyone works hard, so you can talk about how people might be, rewarded for doing better. Everything we do is done with our values in mind, and because it's better for kids, so it's hard to question things that we've done in the past and say, were they really worth it? Yeah. So I do think that there's a lot of things like that you have to be a little bit careful about. But overall, I think especially when it comes to the work, that generally leadership wants to hear ideas and wants to see passion in the staff.
And I think we have to assume the best.
Yes.
That this is a work in progress, and a lot of people have gone before us. And we may not understand their work, we may not have understood the time in which they live, we may not have understood how bold some of the ideas are. It's really easy to pick up a report and go, man, they spent why didn't they just give the people money? But so you weren't there, you weren't there. You don't know what the circumstance was. So you have to assume the best. You have to assume, you also have to recognize that because we have this sort of sacred mission and because the stakes are so high, that we bring our projection of wanting everything to be perfect. We all want the perfect mom, the perfect dad, the perfect workplace, and it's like, that's not real. So what you harness is, I'm going to try and make it the place that I want it to be. If you focus on my contribution. And then when I call the question, this is a place that, has a culture of being focused on results. So it's not, Jan just mouthing off, but when I call the question, it's the question around the data, because I'm kids count. It's the question around the result, because I'm a results-based leader. So when I go, okay, I'm listening to this big thing, really, is this the best we can do given the urgency of the need and given what we know? Those are valid questions that aren't just pain in the neck, I'm going to get fired. Those questions come out of everything that Casey has really developed. Is this the best we can do given the urgency of the need? I think is a question that can always be raised by anybody here. And does this build on what we know works? Don't we know enough about what works, and why aren't we doing more of what we already know? Do we really have to spend all this money learning a little bit more? Is always a valid question. And if it's not, then you don't want to be here.
Okay, so my question's kind of it's more broad, and it's on this. Okay, so we talk a lot about balance. There's been a lot of discussion about balance between like evidence and innovation and hunch, and the balance between the entrepreneurial spirit, but then cross-unit work. And for me, there's still disconnects. Like, they don't seem like balances to me, because I don't really hear, or at least haven't heard, like approaches or proposals or suggested solutions for for balancing those imbalances or closing those gaps. So I was just wondering if you could speak anecdotally, would be perfectly fine, but about ways in which you've had successful cross-unit collaboration or any other regard, and like specifically, like systematically how it happened.
I've got a concrete example.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Casey has spent $100 million on Kids Count, on just funding 53 organizations, $75,000 a year for 20 years. And we have funded hundreds of nonprofit, national think tank groups, state think tank groups, zillions of people, all of whom have all their brilliant knowledge that we've paid for sitting on their hard drive somewhere. So one of the things, and our field is dynamic and it's always changing because it's really hard to be a frontline advocate. You have to raise $1 million of unrestricted money. You get beat telling powerful people things they don't want to know, getting beaten to a pulp, and the reward is you have to do it all over again every single year. It's really, really tough work. And right now, we're saying Kids Count is like our premier state network. It's the only thing in Casey that's to scale. We got somebody in every state. You know, I can get to any newspaper in America, you know, with a click of a button. That's really, you know, powerful stuff. How am I ensuring? So the question is, how do I ensure that all this great knowledge is institutionalized and organized in such a way that somebody can walk into a job in Billings, Montana, and know the benefit of our $100 million investment? So here's all this collaboration, right? All this cooperation is needed to keep this big thing going. Here's the entrepreneurial side. So we envision, you know, we're like Partners in Crime, so we envision creating a virtual institute. We did two things. We got 80 people that are the smartest people in the country around child advocacy and agreed on about 100 core competencies. In order to be a 5-star child advocacy, we said, here are the 100 things you, your staff, your board need to be proficient in. And then we're turning that into assessment for the field. And then what's really innovative, this is the entrepreneurial side, is a couple of us who have been in the field for decades and have access to everybody's database is going to organize all this knowledge. So somebody in Missouri walking in a nonprofit can say, I really need to know about these 10 things. They can click a button and they can go to the best thing we know in the country to teach you about that particular skill. That way we don't have to be in the middle of it. You don't have to wait 10 years to figure out what you don't know. We'll tell you what you need to know. You'll be shocked, but then immediately we'll tell you where you can go to learn it. And it's a resource that we're building for Kids Count, but we're piloting for a lot of other Casey networks. Is that like a good example of like, you know, tons and tons of cooperation and process and blah, blah, blah?
That cooperation, is it cross-unit internal?
So
At
yeah,
every
so
unit.
that's why I was whispering to Jan, because I want to pick up on that
Okay.
piece from a different perspective, because we
Yes,
did it
yes.
together. So one, words mean different things to different people. There are etymological roots to what they mean, but I don't like the word balance. I like the word healthy tension. I do, because I feel like, it's not only as a part of my personality, but I feel like, it's like, because it's not easy. Like, who really knows work-life balance? I mean, please introduce me to that person. Because I'm sorry, I got 2 kids, I'm busy, but so, I mean, it's hard, right? So balance to me is like, it's an aspirational thing. Tension to me is like, when do we have different, so let me give like a real live example. So Jan and I are in different units. We chose, based on our careers outside of Casey and our knowledge of the Kids Count network, how to strengthen the network when we heard Patrick in his first year as president say, I want to prioritize state-based advocates and advocacy. I want one of my legacy pieces to be a strengthened child advocacy field. When we know under the tablecloth what's really going on are organizations falling apart, struggling to make payroll. We have an aging leadership base. The majority of SFAI, which is State Fiscal Analysis Initiative, and Kids Count executive directors, if they're standalone, let alone within an organization, were baby boomers getting ready to retire, didn't because of the economic depression. They have organizations that have very little diversity in their staff and ranks. And we thought, what are we going to do to strengthen this? We worked across 3 units, quietly at first. Jan, Don, then Dennis, me, Cheryl McAfee, Tom Kelly, figured this out completely on our own, built on a legacy of, I think, 3 other staffers in the last 15 years trying to do something about this and failing, right, for a variety of reasons. And we said, we're going to figure this out. And then we managed up to our VPs. We briefed them and then plugged it into the budget. And while we had done all the sort of background work, we weren't carrying the message. Our vice presidents were. And lo and behold, we got money in the budget. We are right now literally in the thick of making this virtual institute happen. And if we pull it off, when we pull it off successfully by 2014, it will be a model for all grantees at the Casey Foundation. Now that's our aspiration. So that's working across disciplines, managing the politics, managing relationships, testing an idea that no one asked us to test. We came up with this on our own based on our knowledge of the field. And it will be groundbreaking when it happens. Like, will it help solve hunger? No. But for how we do our work with state-based advocates, it's going to be huge. Now, entrepreneurship, right? Engagement, externally and internally. How we leverage the relationships. It's still a work in progress. So that's how I take your question in the sort of literal sense. It's live and real because Jan and I and a bunch of others had some crazy idea to make it happen. But for our own tension, she knows that I want it now, tomorrow. Like, I want an app. I want an app on my iPhone to do this. Like
And that's
now.
why I wasn't at the reception.
Right, and so, and
She's developing the app.
And Jan and I, who are both impatient people, have our own tension about this, right? And it's a good thing to have. And it makes us stronger, and we are unstoppable in a really good ethical way because we're fierce about getting this done. And at some point, by the end of 2014, we think
it's gonna be there.
it will all be done. And for all of us to use. And that's what makes this place special and the tension helpful. Not so much the balance, because I think that we're constantly out of balance. And that's I enjoy that. I feel like it's never like we're happy with it all. We're constantly a little bit agitated by what we're finding.
Right.
Now, I would add on the administrative side, there are rights and wrongs, and the entrepreneurial spirit of grant making
There you go.
will get you in an orange jumpsuit.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
on the administrative side, it was really funny because when I first came in and got to meet different people, and I said, we did 1,371 grants in 2009, and every proposal was different, and every process was different. Now, can you imagine the three people in my team? It was 4 at the time, 4 people managing 1,300 different ways of looking at a proposal. I'm trying not to swear, we're on camera. It was crazy.
It was insane.
And it was so funny because if I went and talked to Bart, because I'm going to talk very specifically about Bart, who cussed me out weekly when I got here about me being the man. He called me the man. He said, "You're the system." I was
That's right.
whoa, I was like, I'm going to have to take a moment. Just called me the system because I was saying that you had to make, eventually, grants a certain way.
That's right.
Because there needed to be less entrepreneurial spirit and more form. How's it go? There's art and then there's form and function, and we had to get to that. And so I think on the administrative side, since I do kind of represent that voice, and there's lots of new people from communications, I think, as you think about performance management, although you're embedding yourself within the unit, are you going to have multiple versions of the performance management system? It's going to be a way, and it's going to be applied. And so I think that the tension that I have personally decided to bear, and the reason why I have long sleeves on is because there are marks under here, which is just to say that in my role here, I realized I was a change agent, and I realized that a lot of people weren't going to like what I had to say or what I was proposing, which was that we really get to a fine-tuned machine. But that fine-tuned machine got us to taking almost 2 months just for a basic grant to go through the back stages down to 10 days, 10 business days. And so being able to not only institute some things, and there's more to come, a lot more to come. And the funny thing is that in this year, senior leadership started backing me on those changes, really backing me, oh yeah, we want accountability, we want streamlining, so on and so forth, go do it. And bring the ideas to us when there's policy and procedure issues or whatever else that you want to have changed. That was huge. And I think I built the relationship to hopefully get the input from program staff and our admins to allow for that, and built the relationship with SLT. But there is no healthy tension in grant making, not the practice of making a grant. And so balance was just getting the right. And so sometimes balance is getting to right. And on the administrative side, there might not be a gray area. You may actually be asked to just do it. And that's okay. because I don't go into your grant meetings with your partners with you. You all can talk. You guys can talk on the phone. You can have webinars. You can do all kinds of stuff. But when it's time to make the grant, you do have to say the entrepreneurial spirit ends here, and let's all get to the same. So that's something that on the administrative side, but we were able to do it. It took 2 years. But we're there, and we're getting better and better and stronger. But it was definitely a planned strategy with SLT, with programmatic staff, lots of focus groups, lots of working with grantees behind the scenes. You know, Raphael, people who just said, hey, call my grantee and see what their experience is, doing like those informal kind of conversations with grantees. Those things were really important because then I could take that back to leadership and say, hey, you know, the perception of us is not as great as you all think. We're not a great grant maker in America right now, but we can be, and we can get to some best practices. So different.
Thank you. So I really appreciated your challenge, Jan, about aligning resources and staying focused. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about some difficult decisions you've made in order to get the biggest bang for your buck. And maybe a little bit related is your work and the board's expectations.
I'm proud that as in the 5 years that we've been here, we've been able to double the amount of money that we give for explicitly for policy advocacy. From it was $500,000, now it's $1 million. I wish it was 10 million. So what's really difficult is asking. We pile a lot of expectations onto our 53 Kids Count organizations. We give them $75,000, and we ask them to do their own state book, which is, you know, costs $100,000. Then we ask them to help with, you know, 1 to 5 of our releases. Then we ask them to make sure they disseminate to all people in their capital. Then we ask them to, right? We really pile on a lot. So this pool of dollars is a down payment, I feel, on our commitment to strengthening state-based advocacy by actually paying for advocacy. But then we get 50 proposals back, and we could fund all 50. I mean, the point is, it's $1 million for 50 organizations that are trying to make the Affordable Care Act, you know, happen in their state. It's about making sure that there's $1 billion of extra money for K through 12. It's about saving their earned income tax credit. It's about working with Barton and all these great folks to shut down, you know, hellacious juvenile detentions. It's about making sure there's a qualified child welfare workforce. So we get these things that are worth like $1 billion. If we could do it, children's outcomes would be dramatically different. And we've got to only fund half of them, and they explained the other half what was wrong with those proposals, when we should be, you know, giving everybody, you know, if it was up to me, I'd give everybody 75 for data, 75 for communication, 75 for policy, just as a basic investment in doing the work. I mean, can you imagine running, saying, yeah, we have a fire department, you know, and but I'm only going to pay for like the 2 tires on the fire engine, you know, and you'll have to go someplace else to get the others. It's just a basic service, in my view. So that's an example of enormous need. You know, we're happy with the money we have, but real tough decisions.
In juvenile justice, when it comes to making real change, the policymakers can go a long way, but the real dirty work often happens with the staff. And particularly when we're talking about the deep end, we're talking about probation staff. I mean, something like 1/3 of kids incarcerated nationally are in on technical violations of probation. And so one of the struggles that I had to deal with personally in the work we did in New York was trying to figure out how to change the behavior of an agency where there were like something like 500 probation officers. No, that wasn't that many. I don't know, a couple hundred probation officers and supervisors and directors of the borough offices that, despite the fact they were running agencies the size of some local jurisdictions, felt like middle managers. And the fact that the work that we were going to do to try to improve their skills was not going to have any numerical impact, at least immediately, on the number of kids incarcerated. We brought in a consultant who likes to do things his own way, and he believes very much in a lot of process, and so he had a number of group sessions with with supervisors, a zillion management retreats, did like something like 8 trainings for probation officers. It was a huge investment, and I'm not even sure if Bart knew exactly how much time he was spending. He'd be totally happy with it. But so we talked a lot, me and Nate, the person I work with most closely in this work, about the value that Stu was bringing to the New York City Department of Probation, because we couldn't prove it yet in any way. And even now, we're working on a report for the board about the investment that was made in New York City, and trying to figure out, we can certainly use those performance measures to say, like, we did training for all these staff and everything, but we can't say how it turned out. And that's been a struggle, because on the one hand, we really want to be results focused, and that's the stuff the board cares about, and we want to invest our resources wisely, but then we know that, generally speaking, probation staff and supervisors are not that equipped to do the job that we need them to do. And so moving forward in the deep end, we are facing the same question. How do we shore up probation officers and their supervisors to do better by kids without having to bring in a trainer to retrain all the staff in every jurisdiction in the country, which is obviously impossible.
I want to make this our last question, because I'm also trying to be mindful of time.
Wow. For the last question, I look at us as being together but separate, because we're in 2 separate buildings. And have you ever heard of that being an issue, basically?
Yes.
Yes. I personally propose weekly to anyone who will listen that we just get one of those buildings downtown where the business has gone out, and customize it so we can all be in one place. I think my team, because we interact with every last member of the staff, including the admin side, I think we see, if you just walk down to the first floor and like just interview us, we see the disconnect so much. I mean, just our own personal approach to how I pick up the phone and call, Rachel versus Jan. It's like different. It's a night and day thing, and it's like constantly kind of recalibrating. Not being in the same building has unfortunately engendered 2 very different cultures and a very different level sometimes of expectations, at least in my perception. And I don't know, it's like I joke that like the Doug Nelson part on the outside of the thing can be taken off and put on another building, right? It's almost like we're so freaking attached to the building that we can't see the divide that's being caused by the fact that Rachel doesn't like to come over to 701. I mean, I'm not saying, because we don't have an option. We go over to 503 all the time because of the nature of the whatever, but there's something going on there, and maybe all this new leadership and change will get us someplace different. But people do talk about it. I don't know how publicly we talk about it, but it's an issue.
So I want to make sure there isn't another burning question that you feel must come out. I got you guys. I want to make sure from them. I got you guys.
I don't have a question, though.
I got you guys. Any other questions from the... So from my panelists, we got 5 minutes. What closing thoughts, ideas, that you feel like you must share, you want to share in part before we close this part of the session?
Any thematic, anything?
This is you. This is whatever you guys want to say or not say.
So I have to rush out. So I wanted to offer to all of you that I'm happy to sit down with you personally. I'm on the 2nd floor here in the 701 building, and I'm happy to set up a time with you if I can be helpful to you in any way, either about my own work or your work or however I can be helpful. So that's just a blanket offer. I guess the 2 things I'd leave you with is engage and enjoy. So engage anybody and everybody at the foundation and our external partners. We are rich with relationships across the country, and rich with relationships with great people here at the foundation. To not take advantage of that is something that you don't want to leave this place whenever you do. So engage. And the last is enjoy. Enjoy the extraordinary gift that you've been given of working at the Casey Foundation and all the power and privilege that comes with that. And enjoy the time you get to be with people from all walks of life. Never underestimate someone's story here, because I've learned so many amazing stories from so many great people here that have become not just friends, but ultimately part of my extended family for my life. So engage and enjoy, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Raphael.
All right.
I would just add two things. If you feel like, God, do I really belong? Just know there's 190 people walking around feeling the same way, including Patrick. I'm sure Patrick walks around going, who are these people? So just know that rather than, so don't isolate yourself. It's sort of what Raphael was saying. And something that has moved me and kept me going for 20 years, Arthur Ashe said 3 things. Start where you are, work with what you have, do what you can.
Excellent.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the open, I'm a fairly shy person around people I don't know very well, and I'm probably one of the worst perpetrators of the siloing. But when you get to know me, I won't shut up, and that's especially true when I'm talking about my work. I love the work that we do in juvenile justice, and I feel. I can't even say how lucky I feel to be working for Bart. I think he's an amazing person, and there is literally nobody else who I could work for, who I could get the kind of experience that I'm getting working with him. And so I hope that that's true for other people in the foundation. I think that it is. And that's I think Bart is partially the way he is because he can be that way in the foundation. The culture has allowed him to do his job the way that he really wants to. And so I think that's one of the great things about the foundation, and why you should feel lucky to work here. But I would also just say that as a plug for Bart and and our work, and say please try learn more about it, because I think it's really, really important.
I would pick up on that and say the opportunity to expand your horizons and really understand everything that the foundation does and supports is what I would just challenge you all to do. Go to the program reviews, listen, read Mike's email and the articles that he sends us. Just take it all in. It is such a rich place. And I do believe that as sometimes subject matter experts, you can just zone in, because we are so busy in the work and in our units, and you're missing some of the other stuff out there. And so even in here. So I would challenge us to do that. I would say that your experience at Casey will be what you make it. I talked about Bart. Bart and I are kissy-kissy now, right? Things change.
He's a big teddy bear.
He's a big teddy bear. And I got what his concerns were because I listened, and I was okay with his challenges. But Casey and the experience of you being at Casey will be what you make it and what you bring to the table. And if you choose to kind of shutter in and close down, then that'll be what it is. If you choose to do what some of us have done and really just get out there and expand your horizons, it's such an amazing place. What I've learned from Bart and team, what I've learned from Bill and his team, every day it's something new. And so that's the piece that I would leave you with, which is, as the new piece of Casey, you're the new legacy for us. Make Casey what you want it to be and influence it and push us and change us. But appreciate that there is a legacy here, and we take that legacy very seriously. But we haven't strayed too far from what Mr. Casey originally intended, and that's a joy right there.
So will you guys all join me in thanking the panel?
Homework. Go on the data center. Reading. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
So, an incredible 2 days from my perspective, 3 if you include our early May session with Doug. The hope for these sessions were to give you some context around Casey, Casey's history, and Casey today. 3 things I want to say as closing thoughts. First, the Casey history sounds incredibly smooth, well articulated, very logical, but like with all history, it's a story. It's a look back on what was. Casey today seemed a little bit more complicated, a little bit more messy, but full of opportunities. And that's real. The piece that's not written yet is the Casey tomorrow. And that really does depend upon how you guys take up this work, take up the action, and lead us forward. So that's my first thought. The second one is about this idea of risk. So I listened to yesterday and I listened to today, and I heard people talking about Casey, big risk taker. Casey, not a risk taker. The reality of risk from my perspective is this. You can talk about organizational risk, but the reality is risk within Casey is what you choose to take up. It's risky when you decide, I have an idea, let me pursue this, and maybe someone will take it up. It's risky to say, I think something different. I'm not quite sure I agree with that. It's risky to make that phone call to someone I don't know just to ask them maybe a dumb question about their work. But all those risks are risks that we perceive internally. I would just challenge us to take those risks, because the organization can only have the transformation that we desire if we individually take up the challenge of this great opportunity we have at being at Casey. It's pretty safe. It is really safe. The last thing that I want to say to just close this session is this, and it's a personal one. It was hard for me to sit and be quiet, but I want to say to all of you, I personally find working at Casey to be a great privilege and an incredible place to work. And the reason why I find it to be so is it is the only place I have ever worked where I never doubt that the person sitting next to me, across the table from me, or around the corner from me carries the same passion for helping kids, families, and communities. We all came to this work from different backgrounds, from different perspectives, from different educational settings, from different families, but we all share this same drive to do better by kids, families, and communities. And while I might not agree totally with you, or I might be fully supportive of that point, or I might think that that's an amazing idea, I know that you are doing your absolute best by those kids and families. I'm trying to do my absolute best by those kids and families. And if we can find ways of communicating, partnering, and working together, we can align around that common vision and do really amazing things. So I hope that these sessions were helpful. Welcome to the family. You know us a little bit better. Share it with everyone. And I must turn it over to Steph, because there's some administrative things if I don't do, I get in trouble.
He's saying that, but basically Bill is ingrained into my head that we must have an evaluation for everything. And really that is, like I said yesterday, we take your feedback very seriously, and we want to do our best to improve what we're doing for you guys. So 2 things. Jan did bring some handouts about Kids Count, which should help you do that homework assignment that she gave you. So we're passing out 2 things that she brought. And then we also have an evaluation. So if you could just take the next 5 or so minutes to give us your honest feedback in that evaluation, we would really appreciate it. When you're finished, you can just put it upside down here on this table. And then when you're finished, there are box lunches outside. So you're welcome to get one and come back into the room to talk to each other, or if you need to leave, take one to go. Either is fine. So thank you guys very much.